Welcome back to ASBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted, as always, to be joined by my weekly preview colleague, Elliot Grigg, and of course, my fellow Northern Ireland compadre, Danny. Chaps, I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Kind of a timely discussion, a timely chat, given his performance recently against Errol Spence Jr., and we are, of course, talking about Terence Crawford. This video is going to be centered around some fantasy fights, whether that be fighters from the past or the present that we think, if Terence Crawford were to fight them, it would be some mega showdown. Lads, thanks very much for joining me. Looking forward to this discussion. I'll come to Danny first. Danny, I know you watched Crawford live at whatever it was in the morning the other week there. Is there any name that instantly jumps out at you as, do you know what? It could be someone from the 70s, the 80s, whenever you think it is. But is there one name that jumps out to you that makes you think, oh, could you imagine Terence Crawford against him?
Yeah, thanks, mate. It was interesting. So obviously this was put in the group chat to float the ideas, and you're looking and there's lots that would be entertaining fights or whatever, but you sort of think what could potentially beat Terence Crawford. And I think stylistically, I think will be such an interesting fight, and a style we've not really seen Crawford in with as yet really would be Tommy Hearns. Obviously welterweight, former welterweight world champion, 6'1", 6'2" was he, freakishly tall, unbelievable jab, could go on the back foot, and even so Crawford, even if you saw against Spence, was looking to shoot counters over the jab. Would Hearns be there for him to hit as easily as Spence was? Definitely not for my money. So yeah, I think stylistically that would be a really interesting one. Tommy Hearns obviously widely regarded as one of the best welterweights of all time, as I'm sure Terence Crawford would be as well. But if you think what sort of really tall fighters like that has Crawford fought? The one that comes to mind to me is Ndongo. It was the first fight I ever watched of Crawford, and I don't think I have to clear up for people that Ndongo and Tommy Hearns might be on slightly different levels of fighters. I know Spence is tall, but not as rangy, and didn't fight as rangy as that. So that was the one that sort of came to my mind.
And if that were Prime v Prime, who's your money on?
Well, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've watched anywhere near as much of Tommy Hearns as I have of Terence Crawford. I've watched bits of the sort of Fab Four fights and stuff like that, and then lots of sort of compilation videos. I just think stylistically it would be a good one, and I'm going to go Crawford. He's the best yet fighter I've watched regularly in my time in boxing. I'm sure if we get some old heads in here in the comments, maybe Elliot Grigg will be able to send for me, but I'm back in Bud. I've watched so much more of him, but I think he would be a tougher test than anyone he's faced. I think that's still not fair. They're not remiss to say.
Yeah, it would be definitely a cracking fight. Very, very entertaining and kind of interesting style matchup, as you alluded to. Elliot, your turn now. Is there one name that kind of sprung to mind that you think, oh, imagine Bud against him?
I've got two names. I'll go with the lesser of the two first. Basically, anyone who watches our content recently will know that I'm reluctant to say Danny handed me a loss, but in our pound for pound rankings, he chastised me lightly for one of the fighters I included in this. And I'm going to go to the lightweight division. Obviously, we've seen Terence Crawford has been lightweight champion before. This fight is going to be at lightweight as well if we're going to discuss who we think is going to win. And I'm going Terence Crawford and Tank Davis. Don't think it'll obviously happen at any weight, so that's why it's a fantasy fight for me. I can't see it happening. Down at lightweight, both southpaws, concussive as well. I think at that weight, I want to ask Danny. Actually, I don't want to back him to corner, but I want to ask Danny at lightweight how you see that fight go. Do you think that'd be a Crawford stoppage, or do you think? And if so, at what point in the fight would that happen?
So when you first said Gervonta Davis, I was like, where is this man going? But then you obviously mean that when Crawford was at lightweight.
When Crawford was at lightweight, so we beat Burns and Gamboa down there, didn't he?
Yeah, that's actually interesting, to be fair, because Crawford wasn't the fighter he was at lightweight as he has been at well. He's improved with every division. Again, I sort of started watching Crawford regularly when he was a super lightweight, so maybe it wouldn't be the best to say. It's an interesting clash of styles, actually. That's a good shout.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think that would be an entertaining one. The only thing I would say is I know Crawford's not a huge welterweight, or even a massive super lightweight, but Gervonta Davis is tiny. They were doing the rounds there. He's the same height as what Inoue is, and Inoue was fighting at light flyweight at one stage in his career. I think Gervonta Davis is probably, I love him at lightweight, and I regard him as probably the second or third best at the minute. But I think he's a bit of a lazy lightweight as well. It could be a featherweight or a super featherweight. So I would personally
Definitely.
favour Terence Crawford to win that fight. One name that I'll quickly just mention that is probably a popular topic at the minute and a trending topic is, of course, Money Man Floyd Mayweather. Um, and I'll ask you for your opinion on this one as well. For me, you'd obviously look at Mayweather at the back end of his career. He was campaigning at welterweight. You look at Crawford now; he could potentially move up to 154, but last couple of years he's been at welterweight too. Whether or not let's say that for argument's sake this fight happens and it's either at it's at super lightweight or welterweight, so 140 or 147, kind of take your pick. It's such an interesting fight. I think there's been a lot of opinion recently that Crawford would have been the man to beat Mayweather, but sometimes that's probably recency bias. I think a little bit as well. So interesting to get your two thoughts on that. Danny, you first.
It's interesting. Sometimes recency bias can be a big factor, and then sometimes people just like completely romanticizing the past is also a factor. I don't know. I've seen obviously Frampton said he would pick Crawford to beat the welterweight version of Mayweather. I think without a doubt, like again, this isn't like a fucking groundbreaking statement that the Crawford at 147 would be streets ahead of anyone Mayweather beat at 147, even though he had such a good run there, and especially a prime Crawford. Crawford in that fight would have a lot of physical advantages, would be a lot longer, would be a lot bigger, punch a lot harder, a lot physically stronger. And when you start when I'm just thinking to myself as I'm saying it, when you stack up all those attributes plus a fight IQ that definitely rivals Floyd Mayweather, obviously very differently. Crawford obviously more sort of cerebral attacking, whereas Mayweather a defensive master, as everyone knows. Oh, it's a tough one. I would maybe edge Crawford to get to him, maybe.
Interesting, very interesting. What about you, Elliot? Are you in agreement with Danny there?
When Danny was talking, I wondered which way he was going to drop on the coin as well. To be honest with you, it's almost impossible to call. I'm sitting there thinking it's almost like that what Danny mentioned about styles as well. And obviously Crawford sort of rocking that left over the top as he was doing to Spence. But Mayweather have also seen, didn't we, especially in that Canelo fight, rocking back with that right hand. Obviously didn't have the same sort of concussive power. So the style of that fight would be really interesting. I don't think Mayweather would have the power obviously to keep him off him, but would he be able to basically just get away from Crawford? To be honest with you, mate, the only reason I'm going to say I'm going to edge Mayweather is because Danny said I was old, and Mayweather is slightly old, and I've watched a bit more of him than Crawford. So that's the only reason. But frankly, I'm not prepared to go to the mat on that. I really genuinely couldn't pick either on that. To be perfectly honest.
Yeah, it's genuinely a 50-50 for me. Honestly, I would have if I woke up 10 times, I'd have a different opinion every single day. I think that one interesting thing is obviously that Errol Spence fight. Crawford boxed the whole fight in southpaw, and personally, and a lot of people probably agree, he's such a competent southpaw, yes, but he's actually still better in the orthodox stance. So you're thinking he is so complete, fighting both ways, left-handed or right-handed. Would that have caused massive issues for Mayweather? Obviously, the distance, the natural size there as well. Plus, I was saying, is that fight's at super lightweight or welter, is that when Mayweather was at his best, or was he perhaps at his best when he was at lightweight? It's kind of a matter of opinion, I suppose. And again, I agree. I think it's almost impossible to call that one. We could talk about that fight for hours on end, chaps, I'm sure. But I'll come back to you, Elliot, for your other one that you had.
I had another one actually from the same area that Danny chose his for different reasons. So not necessarily at lightweight, because obviously I think this guy is widely regarded as the best lightweight, but maybe up at super light. I was thinking about someone like Duran versus someone like Crawford, just for the simple, again, that kind of stylistic thing. Obviously, Duran, sort of front foot pressure fighter in certain ways, and I was thinking, how would Crawford stack up to that? Obviously, I suppose he'd be looking to counter as well, as we saw the other time, but it's just those two. Super light for me was something that I again struggled to call, but was a hell of a fight. And I always love to put Duran in these things because obviously how well regarded he is. But yeah, stylistically, the conditioning of him obviously is matched up as well. And obviously going up to middleweight, etc. as well, fighting up there. So yeah, interesting for me that one. But yeah, from the same era as Danny, but not plagiarized Danny. I didn't know Danny was going to go hands initially, but yeah, that's why I've chosen Duran.
What do you think, Danny? Who tickles your fancy in that fight, Duran or Crawford?
If we start picking Crawford against the likes of Duran at 140 and stuff, then we may as well just have him as the best fighter of all time. again, like imagine like how watchable a fight that would be. I think it would be a more entertaining fight than the Hearns fight that I mentioned. You would have to favour Duran in it around those weights. I know like Crawford is the best fighter of this generation, but you'd be hard pressed to find a top 10 pound for pound list of all time that doesn't have Roberto Duran in it, and so tough, punch so hard at those weights, and just like relentless. So I know you've talked about recency bias, and if we start like picking Crawford against Duran and stuff, you're gonna make a fool of us as well. I would go Duran in what would be like such a watchable, entertaining fight. What about you, PK?
Yeah, mate, I was literally just about to say it. This one's definitely like, if you're picking Crawford, it is recency bias, and do you know what? Like, you're probably expecting me to say that I fancy Crawford, but honestly, as you correctly alluded to, I think that if I'm saying Crawford, then I'm literally saying he's one of the best fighters we've ever seen. And do you know what? In recent times, he is. You know, in recent in the 20s, you got to look at it as well. And I know he's still fighting now, and he's 35, but like, you're thinking 21st century.
It's him and Mayweather.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. But no, I think I'd probably favour Duran there in that one too. Simply just because, yeah, he's widely regarded as the best around that weight. And then obviously went up to fight all those mad fights at middle or whatever as well. But yeah. It's
like Danny. That's the point. It's like Danny said with the Hearns one as well. It's like you almost want to see Crawford. Obviously, Crawford took Spencer's power, didn't he? Absolutely fine. But you almost want to get him in with someone whose power is really going to test him and see how he comes through that as well. I mean, that's the intrigue for me in the Hearns one, and also the Duran one.
Danny, what about you? What's your next Terence Crawford fantasy fight?
I was just I hadn't actually prepared a second one, but I was thinking it's another one we sort of discussed, I think, very sort of fleetingly. Again, it is, even though they're two active fighters, it's like, but it's probably fantasy really would be Crawford against Canelo. At any sort of weight, I think it's a live fight. And we discussed it briefly. At 160, I would favour Crawford. I think this version of Canelo, we're not talking like prime for prime or whatever. Just I think Canelo in like his recent fights, you've started to see like he does, not that he's like not fit at all. He started to have like slight stamina issues. Like he faded pretty heavily against John Ryder, and then in other fights, even when he has come on strong later, it's because he's taken rounds off earlier. And I think if he was to cut back down to 160 now, I think that would only sort of emphasize and highlight the sort of stamina issues that he would have. And as we saw against Spence, you saw against Avanesian, Porter, like the list could go on. Crawford just gets better as the fight goes on, and I would hesitate to say he would stop Canelo, because Canelo's like got one of the best chins certainly I've ever seen in boxing and in my time watching boxing. But I could see Crawford potentially winning the decision. 168, closer to 50-50, probably favour Canelo just to be able to like win enough of those early rounds just through sort of physical strength and pushing him back. But again, is it a fight we're going to see? Probably not.
Yeah, that was the one that I had prepared in my head. That was going to be the one I'd mentioned. So I'm kind of glad you mentioned that there, Danny. And do you know what? I'm going to go one more than you, mate. I'm going to say that Terence Crawford beats the shit out of a prime Canelo, to be honest with you. I'm big on Terence Crawford, and you're not big on
Canelo either. You're not Canelo.
I thought he was going to say throttles him up at light heavy as well.
Mate, yeah, he does. He beats him at 175. I don't care what anyone says. Depends how much juice Canelo's on.
It's not outrageous. It's not outrageous.
No, in all seriousness, no. Think that now. Yeah, he's up at 168. It's not a realistic fight really at all. But if it was today's Canelo against today's Bud Crawford at middleweight, I agree with you, Danny. I would pick Crawford. Don't know how I would feel at super middle, because like Crawford's just not that big. So I don't know how I would feel that. But like, even when you're talking about Canelo, obviously those fights with when he fought Mayweather and all, he dragged him down in those bits. I definitely fancy Canelo. I definitely fancy Crawford to beat Saul Alvarez down at those bits. What do you think with that, Elliot? You in agreement?
Well, I was actually having a little look on Boxrec when you said I was talking, and actually, weirdly, they both, so stats wise, so they both are 5'8". Actually, Crawford's got longer reach, 4-inch reach advantage over Canelo. So, frankly, if you put up a middleweight, I would back Crawford as well. Again, it's like you say, the super middle probably might be a bit of a push for me, just because Canelo's obviously more comfortable up there, and like you say, Crawford does look a lot smaller. But frankly, I fully agree with Danny. This version we've got of Canelo than of Crawford at the moment, I'd back Crawford as well. I actually also agree with him. I wouldn't necessarily back a stoppage. I'd be surprised if he stopped him, frankly, but I think we'd also see like Canelo on the ropes a bit, as he usually is, trying to fire off sort of counters, really. And I can see Canelo coming onto him that way, but just having the speed on him as well at this stage of his career.
Just finally, I quickly want to throw a kind of curveball in there. And it's just come to me in my head there. Of course, we're talking about Canelo. And Canelo, he fought Gennady Golovkin 3 times. Prime Golovkin against Terence Crawford. Who are you backing, Danny?
Oh, come on. 160.
Yeah.
Oh, mate, no. Come on. Wait, that Golovkin with that and people get it twisted. Even the version of Golovkin that fought Canelo in the first fight wasn't really a prime Golovkin. The prime Golovkin was like Matt Macklin, boys like that, Willie Monroe Jr., Gabe Rosado, and that's when no one wanted to go anywhere near him. Canelo only fought him the first time because he thought he was like on the slide, and he was. It's like that version of Golovkin, who was like a proper boogeyman, but at 160 would bash up and destroy Crawford. He might have a bit of bother. It might have a bit of bother getting to him, but he would bash him up as he was doing to everyone back then.
You agree, Elliot?
I do, mate. Yeah, I mean, we saw back then, like Danny alluded to there, every single punch hurt. He wasn't even necessarily catching people clean. Wasn't even necessarily catching him. He was catching people on their arms or whatever, but he was just bashing the fuck out of them. So yeah, I think again, like Crawford would be elusive, but I think he would get to him at some point. Yeah, especially at 160. I think he'd beat him. Yeah.
Go on, BK, say it.
Man, no, I was just saying that because I was hoping someone was going to say Crawford, but no, I'm in agreement with you, chaps. I'd go with.
Get on McKendry in here; he'll say
it. Brilliant. I really enjoyed that one, lads. Thanks very much for that. Yeah, it was a good chat there, talking about Terence Crawford fantasy fights. We've got other content on the channel, fantasy fights, the likes of Inoue and some other fighters we're probably going to go through as well. And look at, and of course, all the rest of the usual content on the channel, betting previews, weekly previews, big fight breakdowns, interviews, all the like. So listen, lads, thanks very much. Really enjoyed that, and I'll speak to you again soon.